And we are back. Thanks for hanging out with us. We do appreciate it. Rob Ellis, Derek Gunn. We are Sports Take. Please hit the like button if you could, friends. All right, joining us right now, he covers the Washington Commanders, Monumental Sports. He does the Beltway Football Podcast with our buddy JP Finlay, who we've had on the show many times. And he joins us right now. That is Mitch Tischler. Mitch, welcome to the show. How you doing?
How you doing,
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Good to see you, man.
Doing really good, Mitch. Doing really good, man. We'd love to get your perspective, Mitch, because, you know, the first game was very tight, 34-31. Eagles won in overtime. A game Washington clearly could have won that game. So you're thinking, all right, could be a pretty good game. You watched last week, though, and the effort was, let's just say, not great, to say the least. What is this Washington team?
I think exactly what you've seen kind of the past 3-4 weeks. They're kind of a roller coaster. Week by week, they play up to their opponents. They play down to their opponents. And for whatever reason, under the last 4 years under Ron Rivera, they've played the Eagles pretty tight mostly. So that's been probably the best opponent that they've played the best against so far. But it's a matter of whether these guys can come out and play fired up. I mean, that last game in Philly was the only game of the season they scored on their first possession of the game, and they had a lead, and it's not something this team has gotten used to doing. They've played from behind just about every week, and mostly it's been due to a really poor and porous defense.
Hey, Mitch, earlier in the week, we heard Jonathan Allen come out and just basically just let the emotions flow. And, you know, anytime one player says that, you know, that's a sentiment across the board in the locker room. They've lost 4 of their last 5. Is it too early to say that Ron Rivera could be on the cusp of losing this team?
No, I don't think Ron's on the cusp of losing this team. I think for the most part, the players like Ron. I think they're frustrated with what's been happening here in D.C. and to a man, they can't put their finger on it, but they just basically never come out with any fire at the starts of these games. And, you know, it's been when the offense is good, the defense is bad. When the defense is good, the offense is bad. And they haven't really been able to put together a full game. I mean, again, that game against Philly was the best game they played this season. And, you know, they gave up 34 points to them. So, you know, you can only take so much from that. But, you know, John Allen speaks for the locker room. He's a team leader, and he is frustrated. And, you know, this has become a kind of yearly tradition from John and some of the other leaders in the Commanders' locker room of being frustrated and kind of letting it loose. But at the end of the day, John Allen's a guy who's been here for 7 years. He's the second longest tenured commander on this team. And so he can be frustrated all he wants with the slow starts and the lack of enthusiasm and kind of all these different things that, you know, that he's complaining about. But he's a team leader. He's part of the problem. And, you know, John is a good football player and a good voice in that locker room and a guy who kind of keeps this team together. But it rings a little hollow when you know your team leader is talking about not being able to get guys fired up for the games, because at some point it's got to be on the players to just step up and go all out with it, and that just hasn't happened here. Actually, it hasn't really happened in the 4 years since Ron has been here, but mostly this year.
Wow. Mitch, we're trying to figure out how Sam Howell is still upright at this point. 40 sacks, man. I mean, this dude is taking a beating. How much of it is him, young guy? We've seen it with Carson Wentz. You've seen it with Carson Wentz. Holds the ball too long, you know, and takes a sack versus this guy never really had a chance on that play, and they're not protecting him very well.
Yeah, I mean, the sacks are bad. He's taken 40 so far this season. What's worse is 1 in every 4 times he drops back to pass, he takes a hit. I mean, how this guy has stayed upright is beyond me, and it shows, you know, his intestinal fortitude and the type of player that he is, that he'll continue to stand up there and take those hits. Last week against the Giants was really the first time that I felt like Sam Howell was overmatched, was a little bit lost, was, you know, maybe seeing ghosts per se, and not doing a good job kind of handling blitzes, both identifying him and calling him out. But the issue has been kind of across the board. The O-line is bad. The play calling has been pretty bad, has been mediocre to bad. You know, he holds the ball too long. And quite frankly, the receivers haven't done a good job of getting separation when they've been left on an island. I mean, the one thing that teams have noticed against the Commanders is that if you blitz them, you're going to win. And, you know, Wink Martindale and the Giants last week did that to a T, and, you know, proved that the receivers are having trouble getting off some of those sticky corners, and that creates a problem in and of itself. So, it's not a Carson Wentz situation where, you can pretty much, narrow it down to it's the quarterback's fault. This is an offensive identity issue that this team has had, and it starts from the lack of investment in the offensive line, and has continued through to Eric Bieniemy being stuck in a situation where the Commanders have invested the least amount of capital in the NFL on their starting offensive line, and it's one of those things that you reap what you sow.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That was my next question. The offensive line was bad last year. How did they just omit not addressing that issue this past offseason? I don't understand that, especially if you knew then they had to have some inkling once that last season ended that we're going to start leaning towards Sam Howell. No matter what they thought they might draft, what they may have been thinking about in terms of free agent quarterback, hey, we've got to go with this kid Sam Howell to find out what he can do. If we're going to do that, we have to do a better job of protecting him. How did they totally neglect that?
I got to be honest, I think it speaks to a bigger problem across the NFL where offensive coordinators and guys who are running that side of the ball are in love with their schemes. Their scheme is their scheme, and their scheme is good enough to win. It's just up to the players to execute it. And, the Commanders did have a couple of guys in-house on the offensive line who they were excited about seeing and thought they could step in at guard and kind of help out. And that's Siddiq Charles, who was a 2020 fourth-round draft pick out of LSU. He started intermittently the past couple of years, but has dealt with some injuries. He was a tackle in college. They moved him to the inside. Kind of the same thing with Sam Cosmi, who was a second-rounder out of Texas a couple of years ago. He was a right tackle that they kicked back inside to guard. And so, so they thought that they kind of fixed a couple of the problems because last year the guards and the interior of that O-line were really a problem. They went out and signed Nick Gates, who's a guy that folks in the NFC East know well from his time in New York. And, Eric Bieniemy brought over his guy and Andrew Wiley, to play right tackle. So sadly, I think they did think they addressed the offensive line, and I think they did think they improved it some. They drafted a third round center and a fourth round, offensive tackle. So, they used a little bit of draft capital on it. But at the end of the day, since they got rid of Trent Williams, since they got rid of Brandon Sheriff, they've done nothing to try and rebolster this group and have tried to operate, in the quick passing game and misdirection, so to speak. And it just, quite frankly, hasn't worked. And, with a guy like Sam Howell back there who wants to give his receivers every opportunity to make a play, he'll hold the ball, try and let his guys get open and throw into tight windows. But you have a combination of 5-step drops with a bad offensive line and a quarterback that wants to hold the ball. And we know, what that end result is.
Mitch, you brought up Eric Bieniemy, and look, you may have answered that. It may not be, I don't care who the coordinator is. If you don't have a good O-line, it's tough. But are you impressed at the way he's, called plays, coordinated, whatever terminology you want to use? Because a lot of us look at it and they say, they look at it, if Ron's out of there, he's going to take this thing over. How do you view what you've gotten from Bieniemy so far?
So I've been very impressed with Bieniemy within the organization in that he took over kind of training camp and he ran, he set up training camp the way that he wanted it. The players' days off is now Monday instead of Tuesday, like most NFL teams. So he's taken over a lot of the behind the scenes operations of this football team. And I was impressed, particularly during training camp, with kind of the speed and efficiency and, and enthusiasm that he brought to the field. But as we've gotten into the season, Bieniemy's play calling has not been particularly good. He's a guy who's not done a good job of kind of reacting to what he has and adjusting. And ultimately, you're looking at a football team that a couple of weeks ago threw the ball 55 straight times in a game, and they're passing at a 70-30, 72-28 clip pass to run. And even on top of that, if you have a poor offensive line, then you want to get the ball out of your quarterback's hands fast. And so I love some of those quick pop passes and screen passes and shuttle screens and all these different things that you can do to kind of get the ball into the hands of your playmakers. And they're kind of not doing that. He's sticking with these 5-7-step drops and these long developing plays, and it's become a problem. I mean, the 40 sacks, I don't give PFF all the credit in the world for their metrics or whatever.
Yeah.
But I believe they've only credited about half of those sacks to the offensive line, which puts the other half on the quarterback and the system. And so, it is a new system for them, and it's new players, and we are only 7 games into the season, so there is room for improvement. And I think particularly starting this week, you're going to see a concerted effort to get that ball out quick. I think you're going to see a couple quick pop passes to Curtis Samuel and Jahan Dotson. They're going to run a couple shuttle screens to Terry McLaurin. And especially when you get a defensive line that's as aggressive and good as the Eagles is, it creates opportunities in the screen game. So I'd look for a little bit more misdirection from the Commanders' offense this week, and hopefully a little bit more of a commit to the run, because it's tough to be successful when you throw the ball as often as they do.
Even though the Commanders have lost 4 of their last 5, is the fan base, from your perspective, still enthusiastic about the new direction of the team? With the ownership, with Magic Johnson and that crew in there now, or is it right back to where you thought they would be in terms of the team's losing, fan base is grumbling again?
Fans are very excited about the new ownership and some of the things that are happening kind of behind the scenes. They're equally as frustrated with what's happening on the football field, and we're at a point that everyone was so excited to get Dan Snyder out and get a new owner in that when Josh Harris took over, everybody was, excited. They sellouts for their first 3 home games. Fans were in the stands. It wasn't, the opposing teams taking over FedEx Field like we've seen. Now that we're getting into the season and the losing's happening and the poor play, folks are still frustrated. And now it's, hey, we got rid of Dan Snyder, but the Dan Snyder holdovers are still in the building, and everyone wants to essentially press reset and start all over again. And to be quite honest, barring a miraculous turnaround from this team, starting January 10th, I imagine there's going to be big changes both on the business side and the football side of this Commanders team.
Do you see a situation where Bieniemy stays on and takes over as head coach, or will this be a house cleaning, do you think, altogether, Mitch?
I think Bieniemy has an opportunity to.
Yeah.
Based on the way the first couple of weeks have gone, I would say no, but that doesn't mean that he can't progress into that role. Like I said, the behind the scenes stuff, the football operations stuff that a lot of head coaches take on their shoulders, I believe he's done a good job with, and he's changed a lot of the way that practices are run. One thing that we always saw during training camp was kind of lackadaisical jogging between periods and guys joking around and taking water break, just kind of not the most buttoned up football operation. And Bieniemy doesn't stand for any of that. And that was a big surprise to us when we started seeing it on the practice field. Mm-hmm. And it was a big surprise to the players. I don't know if it made your radar, but during training camp, there was a report that the players had gone to Ron Rivera to complain that Bieniemy was, working them too hard. I don't doubt that there were players that were taken aback by it, probably some veterans who weren't used to hustling and running and working as hard as they were. But that's also the characteristics of good NFL franchises. We've seen the Commanders do joint practices with enough teams who are disciplined and do run between drills. And, you may think of it as peewee football stuff, but that's the type of stuff that good organizations do. So Bieniemy certainly has an opportunity to do that. I think his play calling and his in-game adjustments need to take a big step up if you're really going to consider him to be a head coach next year here in DC.
I saw a couple of weeks ago that the first round pick, Emmanuel Forbes, had lost his starting job. But the defense as a whole is right there tied 4th in the league in terms of quarterback sacks. So what has been the overall glaring deficiency on the defensive side?
Top to bottom, I would say, you have 4 first-round picks along the front 4 for the Commanders: Montez Sweat, Deron Payne, John Allen, and Chase Young. And Chase has stepped up and had a pretty good season. The other 3 have been good players. They're good football players, but certainly aren't living up to their pedigree and what you'd expect out of them. And you've had a little bit of 4 guys who are kind of alpha males and used to all getting their numbers, starting to try and make sure that they get their numbers, and kind of rushing undisciplined and letting quarterbacks kind of break contain. It didn't happen in Philly with Jalen Hurts, but certainly happened, in other games this season. Josh Allen just played him like a fiddle when he was out there, and that's something that, he does to a lot of different teams. But maybe the biggest issue is the linebacking core. Cody Barton's hurt this week. He's been the most consistent linebacker that they have. He has the green dot in game, so that's going to be a change on Sunday for Philly. But Jamin Davis is the guy. He was a first rounder last year or 2 years ago, and he was super athletic and fast and all the things that the new age linebackers are supposed to be. And he just kind of doesn't do a very good job of keeping himself in position and ultimately, allowing guys to get outside of him. And, quite frankly, I'm concerned about what Dallas Goedert's going to do to these guys this weekend. David Mayo is probably going to step in the middle. Last week against the Giants, Tyrod Taylor was able to identify him and essentially threw at him, 5-6 times in a row when he came in the game. He's a guy who can stick his nose in there in the run, but doesn't do such a great job in pass coverage. And Jamin Davis struggles with that as well. So it could be a big game for the Eagles tight ends.
What do you make of the Eagles, Mitch? I know you saw them week 4 up close and personal. I'm sure you probably keep an eye on them like we do with the other NFC East teams. But what do you make of their chances to get back and potentially win a Super Bowl this year?
I think they're the best team in the NFL, period. I've loved the way that they've built this franchise. I love the amount of capital they put into the offensive and defensive lines, how they continue to back up their backups and keep bringing in depth at important positions. And I feel like they're doing it the right way in the modern day NFL. You have a quarterback on a rookie deal and you start building around him and, strategically go out and get vets who can step in and help you out. I love what I see from the Eagles, and I know they're gonna struggle from time to time. I actually think this weekend is going to be a little bit closer of a football game than folks expect. But all in all, it's a team that's built to win, not just this year, but next year, and for the foreseeable future. And I would love it if whoever the new front office, coaching staff, whatever it may be for the Commanders, looks at their blueprint and tries to follow in step, because it's a team that's just built the right way.
Well said. We've heard so much about the stadium proposal for the Commanders. Where's it stand right now in terms? Initially it was mentioned that Virginia, and some people are like, I'm not going to Virginia to watch that team, or some people like, needed a fresh start. Let's move it on. Where's it stand right now in terms of the stadium proposal?
It's pretty much at a standstill right now. I think with the new ownerships coming in, they're kind of working they're working Maryland, they're working Virginia, and they're working DC. The Virginia area that you're talking about was down about halfway between DC and Richmond. It would almost be like if Philly played in Atlantic City. It's solid.
Yeah, that's
hour and a half.
Yeah,
hour and a half outside of the city. I don't think that's going to happen. That if Dan Snyder was still owner, potentially that would have been the only option they had. And if that was the case, they would have taken it. I don't think the new ownership is going to particularly, really give that a lot of credence. It's down to pretty much the old RFK location, which is in downtown DC, or building it kind of in the parking lot or next to where the stadium is now in Landover. It's at a little bit of a standstill, though, because there is a bill in front of the House that would allow that RFK land to be decided on by the DC mayor, as opposed to being a federally owned piece of land.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the House doesn't have a speaker right now, and so things are a little slow in the House, and there are bigger international things happening that I imagine they have to deal with before they worry about, what a couple acre parcel of land in DC is gonna be. But ultimately, what I like is that the new owners put $100 million into FedEx Field and have made a bunch of improvements, and they're noticeable improvements, visible improvements. And, obviously going back to the Eagles fans falling out of the stands onto the field, and, all the different things.
Jalen Hurts almost getting killed. Yeah.
I mean, you almost can't make it up, right? Like it's unbelievable.
Did they move the press box? I've covered this game over 4 decades. That is the worst press box I've ever been in terms of watching a game. You have to look under an awning to see the far side of the field. and the monitors where they show you the game are like on 7 to 10 second delays. So by the time you actually log the play, they're in the middle of the next play. You're like a play and a half behind every game.
It is arguably the worst press box in the NFL. I'm trying to think, maybe it is the worst now that the Chargers are out of San Diego and Vegas, and the Raiders are out of Oakland. You know, before Dan Snyder was the owner, the press box used to be at midfield where most press boxes are in the league.
Novel
Dan
concept
Snyder
right there. Yeah.
Dan Snyder came in, that became the owner's box, and everything got shifted down. It's a weird, we sit for folks that are listening, the Commanders press box is in the corner of the end zone, kind of where the team runs out onto the field. And so you're looking at an angle and you're just below the club level. So it's right above you. It's right above you. Any ball that goes up in the air, it's just up in the air, and you're looking down on the field, waiting to see what happens. It's a little bit of a tough look.
Yeah.
You got. I don't know if you ever get a chance to hear it, Mitch, but I do the post game show on radio for WIP, and Merrill Reese can't. I mean, the way he rips the location where he and Mike Quick do the games from, it's something to be heard. If you haven't heard it, it's very funny. If you just get a chance to get a listen, it's pretty funny.
Believe me, I hear it because we talk about it in the press box box with the visiting media. I mean, it's wild, and folks can never believe that's what it is.
It's unbelievable. I wanted to ask you this real quick, just off football for a second, because you are based out of and have been based in DC. You're a big DC guy. What do you think about Trey Turner and Bryce Harper and what they've been able to do with the Phillies? And is that something that you guys just kind of moved on from, or is it still something you say, man, these two should both be Washington Nationals?
So I'm probably not the best person to ask. I'm a Mets fan.
Oh,
so
okay.
I think a lot of listen, between the Mets and the Commanders, there's a lot of pain in my So, but I'll tell you that going back, I used to cover the Nationals some. I loved Bryce Harper. He's one of my favorite baseball players. I think he's a great guy and obviously a great player. Trey Turner, I think, is also great. I think it's a tough situation in Philly. When things go south, they go south. I hope he's able to turn it around. He's a guy that, both times that he hit free agency, I wanted the Mets to go after him because I think he's a generational type player. There's not a whole lot of guys out there that, have his speed and ability to, five-tool ability and stuff like that. So, the story with the ovation midway through the season and kind of turning things around, there's a lot of things to dislike about Philly fans. I love that they get behind their guys like that and can get them moving. So that was cool. I hope both of those guys have a lot of success in the future. Just not against
not against the Mets. I hear you. All right. Lastly, I got to ask about the artwork behind it. Is that you? Are they your drawings?
They're actually photographs. Yes, they're pictures from a bunch of different trips I've taken.
That's awesome, man.
Right here is a bunch of lightning shots over the Washington Monument. But whenever I visit a new country, I'm a big into photography, so I'll take a picture and get it put up behind me.
Talented guy, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. So with that said, how many countries have you been to, and what's your favorite?
Ooh, that's a good question. I went to Oktoberfest a couple years ago in Germany and Munich, and that was probably the most fun 4-day run in a country that I've had. So I'd probably put that one pretty high. But played golf up at St. Andrews in Scotland, so that ranks pretty highly on the list as well. And then I've been to Iceland 2 or 3 times. That place is spectacular, and I couldn't recommend it enough for folks.
How about in the States? What if you either the best place you've been or the place you haven't been that you want to travel to and visit?
Ooh, so I have. There's only 2 states I have left on my that I haven't been to.
Wow.
North Dakota and Arkansas, randomly enough. But
that's 2 different kind of states,
right? So growing up, our family vacations every year was we would go to a different national park and go to a different baseball stadium. So by the time I was 18 or 20 or so, I'd been to all the baseball stadiums and had been to a ton of the different national parks. Those Utah national parks probably are my favorite.
Nice.
So,
Mitch,
out of last one for me. Out of all the pictures you've taken, because I have friends that are also really into photography. Out of all the pictures you've taken worldwide, what's your favorite one?
What's my favorite? It would definitely be probably this one right here behind me.
Now, what is that?
This is in Copenhagen.
Okay.
And they have like kind of an artist colony there. And right as you walk into the colony, it's totally graffitied out, and they have a signpost, and 8,000 miles to Washington D.C., 75,000 miles to Osaka, Japan, and just kind of all the different cities around the world. And we walked in. I just thought the whole thing was so cool. There's tons of different art all through about a 2-3 square mile area, and you can just kind of get lost and check out a whole bunch of different stuff.
Wow, that's cool, man.
That's
Good for
awesome,
you,
dude.
Mitch. That's a really cool, hobby and sort of side, it looks like a lot of fun, man. And I commend you on that. So I tell everybody to check out Mitch and the podcast with JP is it looks awesome. And we were I was sampling a little bit, honestly, in anticipation for the show, man. So I was getting ready for you. But Monumental Sports, it's the Beltway Football Pod. Okay, that's the Beltway Football Pod, and you can tell everybody where they can follow you on Twitter. Is it at Mitch_Tischler? Mitch, is that right?
You got it. On Instagram and Twitter, Mitch_Tischler, and the Beltway Football Podcast. Anywhere you get your good podcasts. We did the podcast driving home from New York last week, and had a pretty fired up podcast over there. So, depending on how this Eagles game goes, I hope these Commanders come out and show up. But this could be a Sunday afternoon massacre instead of the Monday night massacre.
Okay, so jump on the podcast if that's the case. All right, Mitch, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Keep up the great photography as well. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys.
All right, You got it. Mitch Tischler there giving us the breakdown on the Commander. So good stuff there from Mitch.
So let me ask you this real quick. How many, based on what we were talking about, Mitch and his travels, how many states have you been to in your lifetime?
First off, not nearly as many as Mitch. I can tell you that. That's a great question, Derek. I never thought about the number. I
was writing it down. The reason I'm asking, I was writing it down.
I'm probably in the 20s or 30s. I'm not. I wish I would have traveled more, but I haven't traveled as much as I would have liked.
I have been to 41 out of the 50 states.
That's a pretty good number.
Yeah, 41 out of the 50. I mean, the most obvious ones I've not been to Hawaii, Alaska, Utah, North or South Dakota, Idaho, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. Those are the ones I've not been to yet.
I haven't done a lot of I certainly haven't seen the Dakotas, Montana.
Oh, that's another one. Ooh, Montana. So 40. I've only been to 40. I've not been to Montana. I've heard it's beautiful. Our friend Lance Crawford, his parents live in Montana.
Oh, is that where they're at? Okay.
Yeah, always shows these beautiful pictures of Montana, but Montana's too cold, man. I ain't going to Montana.
Yeah, I would do it in the summer, preferably. I have not seen Seattle, which I really is a bucket list city that I want to see.
City.
Yeah, I 100% want to check that out. I loved California. I enjoyed Arizona. I wasn't there long enough to really take a lot of it in, which is a bummer. It was kind of work, and I was in and out of there.
The Sedona Mountains is one of the most breathtaking areas I've ever had the chance to visit and walk through. It's just surreal when you're standing in those mountains, and they have all these little towns sprinkled around the Sedona Mountains. Just to stand there and look at those mountains. And the thing is, when you go to the Sedona Mountains, you're not worried about climbing up mountains. They have trails you can walk along the mountain ridges. And stuff.
Right. Yeah.
It's so breathtaking. I've been there 3 or 4 times, and it's like, wow.
Yeah.
So
that's something. If the work schedule would ever slow down a little bit, I'd like to do a little more traveling. It just unfortunately hasn't been a great option right now. So for sure, but that's cool. It is definitely a bucket list kind of thing to see some of these places.
Yeah.
For sure. That's awesome. And Danny says Seattle in the summertime. I got you.
Yeah,
I got you.
In the summer.
Yeah.
You won't find it. It's the reason why they call it the Emerald City.
Yeah.
It is the greenest state. And then you have Puget Sound right there. The mountains,
which I heard is incredible.
My goodness, dude. It's like, unbelievable. You know, only thing is it does rain quite a bit. And when I say rain, not heavy rains. The times I mean it's like a misty rain.
Right.
It can be 85, 90 degrees. You have a light misty rain.
Yeah.
It's not uncomfortable. But it's amazing how much moisture they get in that area.
Yeah, no question. All right. Let's get a timeout and let's come back, Derek. We'll do a couple things. We'll do a little hybrid segment. We'll touch on the Sixers again last night. We'll look at the NFC East. Okay, so we know the Eagles are playing the Commanders, but also the Rams and the Cowboys play. Cowboys coming off a bye. Jets and the Giants play. And there's a little update kind of on Daniel Jones, which isn't great news if you're a Giants fan.
Yeah.
So we'll give you that when we get back. So don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back. Derek Gunn, Rob Ellis. We are Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. I'm going to tell you again about blocks. Yes, blocks. Did you know that your PA tax dollars can be spent much more efficiently? They can fund a scholarship for a student in need, and you can get a 90% tax credit refund. Yes, Blocks is the largest scholarship organization in Pennsylvania. They've raised $110 million in scholarship dollars just the last year, all awarded to families who qualify for tuition assistance. They've awarded more than 17,000 need-based scholarships annually, and you can direct your scholarship donation to any private or Catholic school in Pennsylvania. Excuse me. Participation in the program is simple. It takes only a few minutes. You can send your check to Blocks, BLOCS, and they will do the rest. It's Blocks, BLOCS.org/tax credit for more information. They have officers standing by ready to answer or help you with any questions that you may have. There's a demand for tuition assistance, and it outpaces the supply for tax credit scholarships nearly 3-1. Blocks graduates 99% of their scholarship recipients versus 64% rate of Philadelphia public schools. 96 cents of every tax dollar raised by Blocks goes directly into the hands of families who qualify for tuition assistance and can be only used for scholarships and tuitions. We'll be right back.